I am joined by John Carmichael, whose photograph from an airplane of the 2017 eclipse not only has gone viral, but it is just an incredibly beautiful shot. And so, John, thank you for joining me now. I just have to hear this story. How did this come about in 2017 that you're on an airplane and you take this incredible picture?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was 20 years in the making, believe it or not. When I was 12 years old, I learned what an eclipse was. My geography teacher taught me what an eclipse was, and did a whole demonstration, showed us all these photos, and that's what sparked my love for astronomy. And then later on in life, I became a photographer and I became a sport pilot. And so with all these passions merged together for astronomy and photography and flying, I had this idea many, many years ahead of time, if I could get up high enough in the air, could you actually see the shape of the moon shadow moving across the Earth? That's what this dark area is here. That's the shape of the moon shadow moving across the Earth at 2,000 miles per hour. So selfishly, that's what I wanted to witness that. I wanted to see that. And as a photographer, I wondered, can I actually capture this historic, the first eclipse in 99 years in the US, this historic, fleeting, beautiful moment. And so I was really determined when I had this idea. And so I looked at all the commercial flights around the US and tried to match the moon shadow path with all these commercial flights. And I was just pulling my hair out thinking, there's no way this is going to work out because, the moon shadow's flying so fast and these commercial flights are 500 miles per hour. So to try to intersect that perfectly is nearly impossible. But then I saw one flight on Southwest Airlines going from Portland, Oregon to St. Louis, Missouri, and the flight path itself matched the moon shadow path almost perfectly. So there wasn't as much of an intersection to worry about. And I thought, I got to do it. And there was one seat left, and I live in New York. Well, although I'm in my camper van right now, but and so I live nowhere near the moon shadow path. So I had to book another flight to get to Oregon the day before the eclipse. And it was just a normal commercial flight, and Southwest didn't have any assigned seating. And I got Group C, seat 18. And I'm like, I'm going to be the last one on this plane. I really need a window seat, up front so that the wing isn't in the way of the shot. All these factors are against me. So I brought $600 cash with me to bribe somebody for their window seats.
Oh my gosh.
And I just got extremely lucky with the kindest, flight crew. I introduced myself before the flight, and I had all my camera gear around my shoulders, to show maybe I'm legit, maybe I know what I'm doing. And I showed, them some of my photography work, and they said, "You flew across the country to be on this flight to take photos of this?" I said, "Yeah, but I really need a window seat and I'm Group C." And they said, "Come with us." And I got on the plane even before boarding. They introduced me to both pilots and the flight crew, and they said, "This guy's had this dream since he was 12 years old. We need to help him out." And so then I started collaborating with the captain, and he actually washed my window for me from the outside of the plane. And they said, pick whatever seat I wanted. And then I told him, I wanted to get this panoramic view of the Earth. I needed to get at least a 180-degree view of the Earth. But in order to do that, shooting through this little 8-inch wide window, I need to do what's called a photographic mosaic. So is there any way you could sort of turn the plane around when we're in the moon shadow? And he's like, that was his response too. And he's like, I would have to get approval by the FAA to do that. And I said, I know, but I know it's absurd to even ask this. He's like, it is. I mean, don't get your hopes up, but considering it's such a historic day and everybody's so excited, I will ask them, but it's a slim chance. So, and then we climb up to 35,000 feet, and he announces, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do an S-turn maneuver. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to do it. And I'm getting all these shots done. And then he actually the flight attendants get a call from the captain. And they ask me, John, the captain wants to know, how was that turn? I'm like, are you kidding me? This is actually my own private jet now that I always wanted. And so I said, well, since you're asking, it wasn't good enough. And he turned the plane around 5 times.
Oh,
and
wow.
Thank God, and I got all the data in and everything. And it took over a year, not over a year, just under a year to get all of the images stitched together. I took over 1,000 photos in that moment. And it was, hundreds of hours of work. And so I released it on the 1-year anniversary in 2018. Yeah. Yeah. So
what's incredible about this photo is just, first of all, it's spectacular. I had no idea it took that much work, but also I'm just thinking no other professional photographer in the country, in the world, had your idea. This was an incredible idea, and you made it happen.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. I guess I didn't realize that at the time. To me, it was just this vision I had for so long, and it was this sort of this childhood dream, really, and this vision evolved over time. It's really wild. You never know what can happen, you know, if you stick to your core dreams, and, you know, if you have a vision or something, no matter how silly or unlikely it is to happen, you know, pursue it, and don't be afraid to ask ridiculous questions. And, you know.
And that's really what I want to ask you. Tell me about the reaction, because when I first saw this photo, I was like, oh my gosh, how in the world did he even do this? But as you mentioned, there's almost an emotional reaction for those of us who saw the 2017 eclipse and really relate to just being able to see the corona and a completely different view from what we saw on the ground.
You know, experiencing totality is unlike anything you've ever seen in your life. It's really undescribable, and no photograph, no matter what kind of photograph, can do it justice at all. And you really have to experience it for yourself. And so I highly recommend people travel to totality. And, you know, being up in the air like this is special in its own way, to have that zoomed out sort of perspective, but being on the ground is really special because the temperature drops, you know, 18-20 degrees. There's a 360-degree sunset around you. You know, the moon shadow is just bam right above you, and you can actually take your glasses off and look at the sun with your naked eye and see these solar flares and prominences shooting out, and see, you know, it's like looking at the eye of God. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing you'll ever see in your life. And that's an objective statement. That's not even subjective. That's a fact.
I totally agree with you on that. It really is incredible. Have you talked to an astronomer at all about, you mentioned it a little bit, about how difficult it is, first of all, to get that photo and to get the right angles. But you would think in an airplane you would have more time with totality. But as you mentioned, the moon's going more than 2,000 miles per hour, and the airplane is just trying to catch up with that.
Yeah, we did have 3-minute totality, which was about 37 seconds longer than everybody else on the ground. We could have had even longer, but the pilot, you know, was doing all these turns, but we were going with the moon's shadow while we were doing all these crazy turns. And so we actually, and thank God we had just that last few seconds longer, because the last turn is when I finally got my shot of the eclipse itself, which was obviously a very important puzzle piece in the whole thing. And I happened to get the diamond ring moment, which is that last sliver of sunlight shining through the canyon walls of the moon's surface. It's a split-second moment, and I happened to get it on the last turn, and then the eclipse was over. It really was just this incredible meant to be moment. And I, you know, the whole year I was working on it, I just thought, this is important to finish, because it just felt so much bigger than me. And I just, you know, first eclipse in 99 years here in the US, and it was such a uniting moment in our country. You know, everybody just took a pause and just looked up at the heavens and celebrated together, and all the news was just this wonderful story, uniting story. And when's the last time that's happened in our country?
I'm excited to see your next picture, and of course we'll be experiencing this together on April 8th. I'll be out in Fredericksburg, Texas, so excited to see your photo. And again, thank you so much for your time and just sharing your expertise, your story. I really appreciate it, John.